Billionaires are the talk of the town right now. Voters put one of them in the White House, and the president's put another one down the hallway in the shape of Elon Musk, the world's richest man, who's charged with slashing billions in government waste.
Go yourself.
Did you know that since Donald Trump's election victory, Elon Musk's net worth increased by 69%, and that the top 10 billionaires gained 64 billion in just one day after the election?
That's a problem.
In America, the top 1% hold 32% of US wealth, while the bottom 50%, half, hold just 2.5%. Pretty wild, right?
A whole fleet of tech billionaires have kissed the Trump ring and bought the president's counsel in the process.
Recently, Piers Morgan featured a debate between Gary Stevenson and Dave Rubin, and it was, as is almost always the case with Piers's programme, a shit show.
You know, in this country, I'm talking to you right now, half the country struggles to simultaneously feed the kids and turn the heating on.
That's Gary Stevenson, and he's one of the most down-to-earth millionaires that you're likely ever gonna see. And it's because he comes from the slums. He was expelled from school at 16, but leveraged his mathematical talent to earn a scholarship in the London School of Economics. Long story short, he became Citibank's top trader, amassing millions by betting on rising inequality.
Now listen, I don't get paid to have opinions, okay? I was one of the best paid and most successful traders in the world, for one of the biggest banks in the world. I put bets, I place bets. And I've been betting for 14 years that the working class in my country and the working class in your country will collapse into desperate, worsening poverty year after year. I'm a multimillionaire from doing that, from betting on that.
Gary retired at the age of 27, and, disillusioned by the industry's moral bankruptcy, he's now a vocal inequality activist who campaigns for us to tax the super rich.
I shouldn't be here. Doesn't make no sense for me to have a YouTube channel. Doesn't make no sense for me to be here. I got paid millions of dollars a year to bet on the collapse of your working class, okay? I've walked away to come here on this show for free because I want to tell the public, the American people, this gets worse.
That's his message. He made millions betting on the poor getting poorer, and he went on Piers's show to warn people that if we don't start taxing the billionaires, we are heading towards utter catastrophe. One of the ways that he illustrated this is through the example of COVID. What happened to your money during that crisis?
What's the total US government deficit now since the beginning of COVID? Do you know? It's $13 trillion, okay? That's $40,000 for every single man, woman, and child in the entire country of the United States of America. Every single man, even the babies, all right? So if you're out there watching and you're not $40,000 richer now, somebody's got your $40,000, okay? Who? Who's got that money now?
It's a great question. If you have a family of, say, 4, who's got your $1,600,000? Where did that go?
What you have is basically a massive cash injection from the government through the poor to the rich. Listen, we saw the biggest and fastest ever transfer of wealth and increase in inequality in the history of our nations, and it was immediately followed by an inflationary crisis and a collapsing cost of living. This is the clearest proof you will ever need. You don't need me, somebody who's made millions of pounds betting on this. The clearest proof you will ever need of the absolutely bloody obvious fact that if you massively increase inequality, you will decrease living standards for working people.
And that's what
Now, personally, I struggle to see how anyone can argue against what he's saying here. It's really clear. This isn't correlation equals causation. We know the things that have happened as of late absolutely correlate to the poor getting poorer and the rich getting richer. And yet we have this extreme example with COVID.
The reason why American families, their kids can't afford homes is because they're now competing with a billionaire class that is $10 trillion richer. $10 trillion, that's $40,000 for every every American man, woman.
Once again, you have clear facts presented by Gary, right? $40,000 for every person is how much richer the absolutely insanely rich have got. The billionaire class now has an extra $40,000 for every American civilian. Think that through, right? Think about how much money that is and what they're going to do with that, what they are doing with that. They don't just sit on it, they spend it. They buy houses. They put it towards assets that you rent, that I rent. That's what happens. This isn't good for society. It's a terrible thing for society. This wealth inequality absolutely is what's responsible, primarily at least, for why so many normal people, their life is getting so much worse. And now the US has elected Trump to fix social issues, right? To remove the systemic problems. And yet the systemic problem is the billionaire class. This is the problem. Now, as we're all painfully aware, back in the day, go back to, say, the 1950s, the 1960s, what we have is people being able to buy homes on one salary. Normally, just the man was working, and that was enough to be able to get on the property ladder, to actually be able to, sink your roots into your country, to become part of it. But now you have two people that are working full-time jobs, and they still can't afford to even get on the ladder. They keep having to rent, which means more money going to these people that have an insane amount of money already. And as life is getting worse, rather than recognizing that the issue is the wealth inequality, what we're doing is focusing on other things. And consequently, the rich keep getting richer and richer because we keep putting into power people that don't care about you. They don't care about me. They don't care about the little guy. They're not like Gary. What they care about is making more money. What they care about is satisfying their donors, the billionaires that are giving them money, that are giving them what they need so that they can spread this message that your real enemy isn't the wealth inequality, when that is what's killing us from the inside out. Now, the other millionaires on the show, Piers Morgan and Rubin, they push back against Gary. For instance, they say, look, tell us one time when taxing the rich actually worked. And he gives it straight to them.
I will point to a country where taxing the rich at a fair rate led to good living standards for working people, United States, 1955.
The post-World War II era in America saw some of the highest marginal tax rates in US history, with top earners facing rates of, get this, over 90%. This period coincided with what many economists call the golden age of capitalism. Let that sink in. 90% tax rate. Golden age of capitalism. It turns out that when you make $1 trillion, you don't need 90% of it. You can make your society better. We could create a culture where we actually love and respect those that make billions of pounds. They just need to be able to give some of it back, to recognize that life is half chance, to recognize that their happiness, their wealth even, is predicated on others. That's all that's needed. No one needs $10 billion. They just don't. No one needs $1 billion. The golden age of capitalism is an unprecedented era of broadly shared prosperity. The high tax rates on the wealthy helped fund massive public investments in infrastructure, like the interstate highway system, education, including the GI Bill, which sent millions to college, making all of our populace smarter, and housing programs that created pathways to middle-class wealth through home ownership. What made this system work was that the revenue generated didn't just sit idle, it circulated throughout the economy. Workers earned living wages that kept pace with prosperity. Unions were strong enough to ensure fair labour practices, and the wealth gap remained relatively small compared to today. The result was a thriving middle class where a single income could often support an entire family, buy a home, afford healthcare, and send children to college. This wasn't socialism. This was capitalism with guardrails that prevented extreme concentration of wealth at the top while ensuring broad-based prosperity. The facts are there for anyone that actually wants to look this stuff up. It's right there. It's just the super, super rich don't want you to see it. They don't want to buy it. They want to be even more rich because somehow having an extra £10 billion makes their life better. It doesn't. It just doesn't. And it makes your life fundamentally worse.
Give me the blueprint for how we stop going down what you think is an apocalyptic path.
Tax work less, tax wealth more. Simple as that. You can't have ordinary working people paying 40-50% while billionaires pay 5%.
And it really is that simple. Look, it's often said that we have a problem with not being able to feed the poor, but we don't. Our problem is that we can't satisfy the super rich. When you present the facts, when you show them that all of the injection, all of the money that went in to be able to stimulate with COVID went straight to the super rich, And they still are not recognizing that that's a big problem, a problem that we need to fix, when the statistics clearly show that the average person, the middle class, is getting worse. The poorer class is getting worse, while the super rich keep getting richer and richer. If that doesn't motivate them, if that doesn't make most of them, or many of them, recognize that there's a serious issue here that needs to be attended to, this is going to end in disaster. It's going to end in disaster for everyone. Now, does Piers and Dave Rubin get it? Do they recognize what Gary is saying? Do they recognize the catastrophe that we're heading into and that we're largely already in? Do they fuck? Dave, running the classic conservative rage bait, made it about trans people.
Make sure that there is as little waste as possible, that we're not spending money on, trans comic books in Peru.
Meanwhile, Piers and Dave, to be fair, they pull the same utter bullshit of pretending that taxing the super rich somehow is socialism.
Also, I would say whenever socialism has actually been tried,
It doesn't work.
it
period.
doesn't work.
Can I
Nobody
talk a little
does
bit?
It's an idea.
Sadly, this rhetoric works on some people, and maybe it will keep on working. But I am seeing signs, at least, that people, including conservatives, are starting to recognize that we do need to do something about the wealth inequality. We have to do something about it, and it will involve the government. It will involve taxation. Look, I mentioned at the beginning about Elon. Elon's company Tesla made something like £2.3 billion in, I think it was income, last year. Do you know how much tax he paid? Have a guess. 0. Nothing. None of that money came to you.
I paid 50-60% a year tax. At the same time, Duke of Westminster inherits £10 billion, more than 3,000 times what I made, pays nothing. Do you think that's fair?
So Trump and Elon talk about gutting out and getting rid of all of the corruption, and yet both of them are mega rich at this point, and both of them pay pretty much no tax, particularly with the way that their companies work, such as Tesla. The last thing I want to say is that, Gary, I doubt you'll ever see this, but Gary, we appreciate you. Keep telling it as it is, brother. We need people like you doing what you're doing. I know it's a hard thing to do. I know it's against your interest, but please, keep it up.